Hey, Stemsters. Mr. Santella back with this week's Cultures of Dignity lesson. We took a couple weeks off from Cultures of Dignity so that you could reconnect with your peers and your teachers and talk about what it's like being back at school. Last week, I did a lesson on work ethic and grit. Now, middle school, you're really going to have to work on your work ethic and your grit since we're going back to online learning. A lot of you have told me how hard those asynchronous days are because there's nobody there telling you what you have to do or telling you go and do your work. You're going to have to do that on your own. This is your opportunity to really show your maturity, that work ethic, and your grit. If you need help, please reach out. Go back and watch my video from last week. There's a lot of good information about work ethic and grit on the internet as well. All right, scholars, let's go ahead and get into this week's lesson, which is on neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is something I've talked about in other lessons, but this lesson is specifically about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is also tied to growth mindset, which I know almost every student in this school has heard. I would be willing to say every student in this school has heard and talked about, not work ethic, they've talked about growth mindset. So I'm going to show you the connection between growth mindset and neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new connections and pathways and change how its circuits are wired. So our brain is a supercomputer, and it has different pathways to different parts of our body. Now, these are called neurons. So the cells in our brains, called neurons, carry electrical impulses to different parts of our body that either have us do an action or a certain emotion. Like right now, there are a constant stream of electrical impulses going from my brain to my lungs, telling my lungs to breathe. There are continuous electrical impulses being sent to my heart, telling my heart to keep pumping blood. So your brain is constantly working and has these pathways or connections that are constantly carrying real electricity to different parts of our body. Well, why does neuroplasticity even matter? Well, scientists used to believe that our brains didn't change after childhood. That's not true. In the past decade or more, scientists have really found out that our brains are pretty flexible and these pathways can be changed. That's neuroplasticity. So think about tying your shoe. When you first learned to tie your shoe, it was really hard. You didn't have that pathway in your brain telling you how to tie your shoe. Okay, so then you'd finally start and you were able to tie your shoe after, a minute of trying. Then the more and more that you practice that pathway got stronger and stronger. And eventually it got to the point where it was just automatic. You could tie your shoe and think about a million other things. You didn't need to think just about tying your shoe. We call that automaticity. So your brain works until something is automatic. Now, the things that are automatic are hard to rewire, right? So if you want to learn to tie your shoe a different way, it's going to be hard because that pathway is telling you to do it one way, but you're really trying to learn to do it another way. But that doesn't mean you can't. You just have to form a new pathway, right, in your brain that tells you how to tie your shoe a different way. Okay. Now, that same kind of thinking can be tied to anything in your life. If there's something you want to learn to do, well, go and learn it. It may take a while. You're going to have to practice, right? And you've heard me say practice makes permanent. Well, that's what I'm talking about, is the more you practice, the more that pathway from your brain to whatever it is, whatever part of your body you're using to learn this new skill, it becomes permanent. And once it becomes permanent, you have automaticity. That's how we get better at things. Okay. Now, it's not just about doing a certain activity, it's about a way of thinking as well, right? Having that growth mindset, having a positive outlook on things. Those are pathways in your brain that help you think a certain way. So, our brain continues to grow well past our childhood. And actually, it continues to change throughout our entire life because we're always learning new things. And if our brain wasn't flexible, then we know we couldn't learn new things. But I know personally that's not true, right? And you'll learn that as you go through life, that you're always learning new things. So you aren't a fixed set of abilities. Scientists used to think that once we're physically done growing, that your abilities were also done as well, that whatever abilities you had in that moment were the only abilities you would have. Again, we found out that's not true. I've played a lot of golf this year and I have improved so much. And that's because I have neuroplasticity. My brain is learning new ways to golf, right? I keep practicing and it's making permanent pathways that's making it automatic for me to play and be successful at what I'm doing. So, why should you even care about this? Well, because there are times when we need to rewire our brain. We might have bad habits, or we might have a good habit that we even want to change and make it even better. That's why we should care about this, because neuroplasticity allows us to make those changes for the better. So, how is your brain wired now? So you have well-traveled circuits, and those are those ones that I'm telling you, those pathways that are permanent, things that you've done so many times, you have automaticity. So for better or worse, we have habits that we either want to break or make better. And because we've made circuits for certain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, they become the first signal our brain gets, and then the first thing we do, right? It's automatic, that automaticity. It's not always a good thing. You go to math class, you walk in, and you're like, oh man, I hate math. I'm not going to do well. That is a fixed mindset to start with, but that's also your automatic thought. So with neuroplasticity, we can change that thinking. So for better or worse, we have these habits or the way of doing things. Well, neuroplasticity allows us to change them or to even make them better. So I'll give you another example. Before I was a teacher, when I used to write, I would write in all capital letters, right? The job I had before being a teacher, I could write however I wanted because I was really just writing notes for myself. So I wrote in all capitals. Well, when I decided to go back to college to be a teacher, I had to retrain my brain to write in both uppercase and lowercase letters. It took some practice, and that may sound crazy to some of you, but it's true. It took practice for me to learn how to write like I was taught in school, because it had been 20 years of writing in all capital letters, and I had to retrain or reprogram my brain, those neural pathways, to think different, to do it different. Okay? That's neuroplasticity. That's not all, though. Okay? So when you make new choices, you also create new pathways in your brain. So I gave you the example of walking into math and making the choice of feeling defeated already. Well, if you choose to have a growth mindset and saying, you know what, I'm not good at math yet, you're creating new pathways in your brain as well. Okay? Now, why are new circuits good? Well, because some of our well traveled circuits may have strengthened towards habits we don't like or aren't good for us. Okay? I love ice cream. I love it too much. I need to retrain my brain to not have ice cream every night. Okay? As you get older, you'll understand you can't just eat anything you want. You've got to be more mindful about your diet and what you eat. I need to retrain my pathways to not eat ice cream every night. It's a work in progress. So, neuroplasticity means that with repeated and dedicated attention to a new action, feeling, or behavior, you can actually rewire your brain. Again, I'll go back to teaching myself how to write again, right? It was hard. When I first started doing it, I had words where half of it was capital, half of it was lowercase. Now, I don't write in capital letters unless I have to, unless it's proper grammar. I start my sentences with capitals, proper nouns with capitals. But I'm back to writing like I was taught in school. But it was hard to retrain my brain to do that. So, if we want to learn grow or change a habit we don't like, we can strengthen a new path and weaken an old one. So there is some truth to the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that has to do with your brain. So I learned Spanish in high school. I cannot speak Spanish. I know tiny, tiny bits of Spanish. But when I was in high school, I was pretty good at speaking Spanish, but I haven't used it since then. So those pathways are weakened and now they're almost non-existent. So you do have to continue to use these pathways in order for them to become automatic or for you to have that automaticity. So the same is true if you don't use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So neuroplasticity means change is always possible. It's always possible. But this is where I want to tie it to that growth mindset. Growth mindset is a thinking about change, a thinking about I can be better. I might not be able to do this right now, but I will be able to do it in the future. The power of the word yet. I can't do it yet. So I'm teaching my 16-year-old, or my 15-year-old daughter to drive. When we first started, we had to go super slow. We couldn't go out on the main streets. We could just drive on the side streets of my neighborhood. Now my daughter is driving on highways. That took time. It took a growth mindset. If she was like, well, I can't do this, well, then she never would have gotten better. But having the thought, the mindset of I can't do this yet has allowed her to become a much better driver. Now she's made mistakes. That's awesome. Failure is just your first attempt in learning. I talked about that last week when I talked about work ethic and grit. Growth mindset is so important because without growth mindset, neuroplasticity doesn't even matter. If you don't have a growth mindset, your brain isn't going to change. So you're wasting that neuroplasticity. If you're always negative Nancy and I can't do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to improve, I don't want feedback, then neuroplasticity doesn't matter. You will be the same person today, or you'll be the same person when you grow up that you are today. So growth mindset is essential to using neuroplasticity, because if you have a fixed mindset, you're wasting your neuroplasticity. So you have more control over your emotions, behaviors, skills, and choices than you might think. You have automaticity with some of those, with behaviors. I always get angry when this and this happens, right? I always make a bad choice when this and this happens. Well, that's how it is now. But with growth mindset and neuroplasticity, you can change those. You have control over it. And look, I know what it's like to be a middle schooler. I know what it's like to be a fourth grader. I know what it's like to be a fifth grader. It was hard sometimes to control the emotions. They just seemed like they would just come out. And that's normal. But neuroplasticity and growth mindset help you actually shape those behaviors to what you want them to be. Believe me, I know some adults that still need help with this, okay? So neuroplasticity, which means there's no, well, this is just how I am. There might be a scared you, an unsure you, a vulnerable you, but there is no fixed you, okay? You can always improve behaviors, actions, thinking, abilities, but you have to have that growth mindset. You've got to create those new pathways. So remember, you matter, your emotions matter, and other people matter. Now, I know that was a lot of Mr. Santella talking. What's new, right? I have two videos I want to watch real quick. One is about neuroplasticity, and then one is about growth mindset.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right, scholars. So there was a quick explanation of neuroplasticity. They didn't use the terms automaticity or growth mindset, but remember, automaticity is what we automatically do. And that's what's hard to break sometimes, is what we always go to. All right, here's a second video on growth mindset.
There are two types of mindset we can cultivate. One that embraces problems as opportunities to learn, and one that avoids them, often out of fear to fail. People that avoid conflicts can be described as having a fixed mindset. Those who see problems as interesting challenges have a growth mindset. Sometimes we like to switch from one to the other. People have a fixed mindset because they believe that basic qualities like intelligence or talents are fixed traits, and that these traits are responsible for success. They often like to document past achievements. With a growth mindset, people believe that new abilities can be developed through practice. This view creates the love for learning that most great leaders and artists have in common. For them, life becomes an exciting journey with endless opportunity to figure out new things and advance. To develop a growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck, the Stanford University professor who coined the term, advises leaders, teachers, and parents to celebrate trying. Teachers should applaud students for any grade if they studied hard. Parents should encourage their children to develop any new skill they are interested in. Doing this will make them learn the skill of learning, which will also help them back in the classroom. To illustrate the difference in everyday life, let's observe two imaginary kids. Jay thinks you've either got it or you haven't. Anne knows that she can learn anything if she wants it enough. At physical exercise, Jay avoids challenges. When it's time to jump over the vaulting horse, he's afraid to look stupid and be laughed at. Anne embraces any challenge. It's exciting, it's fun. She knows that failing is part of learning, and if she tries hard, at the end, nobody will laugh at her. Jay avoids feedback. If the teacher tells him how to improve an assignment he has been working on, he takes it personally. Anne knows that to improve, she needs to listen to constructive criticism. She also understands that it's not her that is being assessed, but the results of her work on that one day. Jay always takes the easy road. For example, he likes escalators and hates to take the stairs. When he is practicing the guitar, he stops the moment he's getting stuck. Anne usually doesn't even take escalators. She jumps up the stairs, counts every step in her head, and enjoys feeling the blood rushing through her veins. She practices the drums every morning for 15 minutes. Not that she always enjoys it, but she knows that effort is part of a journey to a more fun life. Anne likes to see others succeed. It inspires her. She knows that if she motivates her friends to get better, she herself is likely to grow too. If his friends try new things and succeed, Jay feels threatened. He's afraid that their success will put pressure on him to do more with his life too. Modern companies look for employees with a growth mindset because they solve problems and persist despite obstacles. To spot the right ones, some ask during the interview whether the job applicant believes if managers are born or if management is a skill learned. Jay thinks that managers are born. Anne gets the job. Neuroscientists support the idea. They confirm that the brain grows like any other muscle in the body, with training. Studies show that adopted twins tend to have higher intelligence compared to their siblings who stayed with their biological parents. The difference appears to come from the higher educational levels of adoptive parents and shows that nurture is more important than nature. A simple switch in how a person views a situation can mean the world of difference. Not just the outcome of that situation, the outcome of that person's place in life. As the late poet Samuel Beckett once said, "Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail better." What do you think about the concept? Is it overly simplistic? And if you buy the idea, do you believe it is possible to make a permanent switch from a fixed to a growth mindset? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below.
All right, students, so that was a video on growth mindset. As we saw, having a growth mindset gives you a better chance of being successful in life. If you want to be an engineer, go and do it. If you want to be a doctor, go and do it. No matter what you want to be, go and do it. But without a growth mindset, you're not going to be able to. All right, scholars. Here's what I have for you. Again, Flipgrid, Google form, 3 questions. What is neuroplasticity? What is the connection between neuroplasticity and growth mindset? And how does understanding neuroplasticity help you as a student? All right, till I see you next week, have a good rest of your week. Bye.